There are enormous benefits to technology, and then there's also an enormous price being paid.
In this week's episode, I sit down with Damian Chaparro, co-founder of Aro Hā Wellness Retreat in New Zealand, a place the world has come to know for its regenerative design, transformative experiences, and deep connection to nature.
It was like too much, too fast, too much change, no community, no family, and like all the weight on your shoulders.
You would have been richer for the experience and the growth that it gave you.
I had never felt that good before. I'd never felt that awake, that connected, that in love with life.
Damian's journey is one of vision and courage, from imagining a retreat that would embody wellness in every detail.
Most of us intoxicate ourselves, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's kind of like the quick fix.
Damian shares his philosophy of enoughness, the role of community and healing, and why personal regeneration is inseparable from the regeneration of our planet.
A lot of the best choices kind of have delayed gratification, and they require some discipline.
A lot of the time you actually find the gift of life.
We need a little grit to do it right.
Helping us quiet the noise of overwhelm and discover what it means to truly live with enough is my guest this week, Damian Chaparro, the visionary behind Aro Hā Wellness Retreat. Damian, welcome.
Steve, thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
You're across the ditch in New Zealand.
Yeah, little town called Glenorchy, bustling population of 380 people.
Beautiful. It's actually a beautiful part of the world. I always call Queenstown and those kind of surrounds like heaven on earth.
Yeah, they're stunning, otherworldly.
Damian, when you hear the phrase noise of life, what does it mean to you?
I guess where that lands is that life is noisy, that there is a lot vying for our attention, and that without conscious effort, certainly in my life, the noise can almost be a bit overwhelming. It can certainly be distracting, burdening. My system tends to kind of try and work harder through it all, through everything that's coming at me, try to learn everything, pay attention to everything, conquer everything, solve everything. And that can feel very noisy inside. So yeah, the noise of life. I would say I probably would create two distinctions. There is the noise around. There's the noise coming from outward inwards, and there is certainly noise coming from inwards. And I know here at Aro Hā and certainly in my own life, we spend a lot of time pushing and pulling against how to work with those two aspects of our lives. Yeah, great topic.
Yeah. So as the visionary and one of the co-founders of Aro Hā Wellness Retreat, talk to me about, what are you noticing in the pace and the patterns of modern living that are leaving people so unfulfilled and burnt out?
I'd say the number one is, 20 years ago when I first started leading retreats in California, people didn't have smartphones, they didn't have technology. And, slowly over the years, people started wearing headphones a little bit more. And that became a little bit of a distraction from present reality. But now we are, some of it depends on the stat you look at, but somewhere between 10x and 18x more content coming into our brains and into our eyeballs. And it's an onslaught. And I just don't think we were really set up for that. And so all the ways that we can stay nearly always switched on. I notice my brain kicking on and wanting to achieve something or look at something or study something or ask a question about something in the middle of the night when it has no business caring about any of that stuff, and it still kicks on. So it's the most modern, wellness topic that there is just technology and how we navigate this world. We're not getting rid of it. You and I are using it right now to do good work, and so there are enormous benefits to technology, and then there's also an enormous price being paid, which I think we're really seeing in a lot more places than we might realize, including global politics and the whole thing. Yeah,
it can be a bit of a a scary space, the digital age and the pace that technology is moving at, including AI.
Yeah.
I look at the world and I kind of talk about it a little bit of way that, years ago we used to, listen to records, right? Or years ago we used to write letters, or years ago we used to do all these things that were kind of just the normal, right? And I actually find that now, going to dinner without your smartphone, instead of an email, writing a letter, doing these things that were once normal are actually now the new special.
Novel. Yeah. Very unique to sit down and pen a letter. I can't remember the last time I wrote a letter to somebody and addressed an envelope and put a stamp on it. It's been a long time.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's something that I think stands out more. I talk to people a lot about when they're like, "Oh, how do I stand out?" Well, don't stand out by an email or a video, like an email or a text message. Do a
Yeah.
video introduction or do something that is actually going to stand out, because everyone's getting lots of emails, everyone's getting lots of text messages, and these days it's like, where did I get that message? Did I get it on WhatsApp? Did I get it on Messenger? Did I get it in my email? Like, there's so many points of communication now, it just gets overwhelming.
What do you do to manage that onslaught and that noise in your own life?
I just don't put too many expectations on myself. I try to plan
Yeah.
as much as I can. So even with this podcast, I'm always like, I think I'm 5, 6, 7 episodes already recorded ahead, because going through my journey, I knew that I didn't want to put extra pressure on myself when a guest is sick or someone pulls out. So in that example, I just plan ahead with things and make sure I'm 1 or 2 steps ahead. Or if I can't control it, I just let it wash over me. I just let it be.
Mm.
I always
Mhm.
find things happen just how they're supposed to happen, right? So, sometimes I've had a guest on a podcast where it wasn't able to work, but 6 months later it did, and that's just the way the universe works.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm.
So talk to me about the creation of Aro Hā. 20 years ago, you started, retreats in California. Um, Talk to me
Yeah.
about
That's,
where
that
where it
was
was
the,
born.
there was a big leap, of course, from, I went to university, got a couple of degrees in business and went down a fairly traditional path of seeking what probably seemed like a great place to head, a good career with, great bonuses and a bustling future. And so I was in tech in the early days, and then made a leap into health and wellness. And that was a turn that I just, could never have quite forecasted what was going to come from that. But I moved out to California, started teaching yoga. And I think one of the things about health and wellness that is interesting is that even though for any of us that have dipped our toes into the weird and wacky world of wellness, if you were lucky enough to receive good guidance or to have a good experience, what you would have noticed is, sure, maybe it was a bit different, or maybe you were doing things that you hadn't done before, but afterwards you should have felt a palpable difference. You should have felt better. And that happened for me on my very first retreat in a really big way, where I went through a 7-day program and I had never felt that good before. I'd never felt that awake, that connected, that in love with life. And it just was like a bell ringing. I mean, crystal clear that was actually what we were all after, and that was what everybody was seeking, and we just happened to be doing it in all these different ways, and most of them weren't delivering. And here were these simple practices that could really bring you to a different state of consciousness that really delivered on what we were seeking. So that was the hook, man. And it sunk deep. And I knew in that first week that was me. And so it did about 5 or 6 years there in LA, running retreats seasonally in Europe. I was running retreats in Mallorca and Spain, and then started my own business and started running retreats in New Mexico and California. And then what is now Aro Hā became a partnership during that time. And within, a few months, that really became clear that everybody involved in that project, myself and my business partner, were very serious about it. And so sold everything, moved country, came over here with a few boxes and lived in a car for a while and looked for real estate and just did a lot of things I'd never done before and lived in a very consistent state of kind of I would say it was like the edge of comfort, discomfort. It was exciting. It was fun. It was amazing. It was like my dream was coming true, but it also just seemed so surreal and so unlikely. And, they say when they talk about like flow state, there's a certain amount of novelty that we can handle. There's a certain amount of
Mm.
edge, but you also need a certain amount of expertise and a certain amount of comfort and a certain amount of all of these qualities in order to like enter into a flow state. And I would say most of the time I was a little bit over my head. It was like too much, too fast, too much change, no community, no family, like some new country with this crazy project and like all the weight on your shoulders. And so looking back, of course, it all of that was coming from within, that inner relationship I was talking about. And and yet the process like stretches you and ultimately the discomfort teaches you. And Aro Hā, landed and got built and opened in 2014. And we've been now open for 10 years. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's been
that's
a fun ride.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So in your life, going from IT, going, the normal kind of path of corporate, and there's a lot of people making this shift at the moment that are kind of going from the corporate, hitting burnout, kind of finding wellness and well-being and kind of going down that track. But was there a moment for you that shifted where you were drawn to that first retreat?
My first ever retreat didn't hook me, actually. And I guess this is just good for all of us to know. It's kind of like, your first hairdresser may not be the one you stick with for 10 years, In fact, it could be horrendous. And so for me and where I was and my understanding of who I was and what I was, I couldn't quite comprehend. It was a 2-day silent meditation retreat, and we basically just sat in meditative practices that were all done in a different language. So I couldn't really understand what was going on, and it was just very foreign and quite strong. I would say it was fairly now looking back, I realize it was just kind of advanced practice, and I wasn't advanced. So it was just really uncomfortable and off-putting. But then I had an experience that really did land and was just the right mix for me and was modern in the sense that it matched my culture, and used the sort of resources and evidence that my thinking mind needed to kind of go, okay, I get that, I can understand that, and I do value that. And so that experience was really peaky and really powerful. And people often ask me like, where should I start and what should I do? And I just say, if something doesn't hook you right away, don't run away from it. Like let's say you're looking for yoga or you're looking for, whatever it is, a personal trainer or a coach, give a few a try. Just make sure you allow a little bit of variety and a little bit of exploration before you make up your mind. And usually we'll find something, I would say in sub five efforts, we'll find something that speaks our language a bit better. So, yeah.
Yeah. And those obviously traveling the world, hosting a lot of retreats.
hmm
What did you pick up on? What was the recipe that you started at Adaha when you first launched it?
Yeah, so I had worked at a place called the Ashram in LA. And if you if you've been to the ashram and you come to Aro Hā, you're like, oh, I see some of that. Like the backbone of it is very similar. And yet it's different, And so I also had worked and lived at a place called Esalen in Big Sur. And at the
Beautiful.
time, yeah, those were two of the big influences for me. And then of course I'd studied with individuals, but that's more like the granular teachings that come through that. But the basic structure of what we're doing here is like a love child between those two experiences. And I guess the additional thing that I saw was that the world's I'd never seen a retreat center that was essentially designed and built from the ground up to embody not only incredible teachings for us as individuals, which is why most people go to health retreats. They need resource, they need regeneration, they need support. And yet there was also this opportunity to teach layers of how do we build structures that are supportive? How do we grow food that is supportive? How do we manage waste in a way that's supportive? You know, how do we as humans create a society that might be just that one step better than what we're doing now, while also taking great care of ourselves? And so, Esalen was built over the course of years. There were already structures there. It kind of inherited a lot of its structure, and the same with most of the places where I'd worked, including the ashram. Those were inherited structures. So they never really got to master design something. And we didn't know we were going to do this. We thought we would retrofit something that we found because that sounded easier and cheaper and faster to open up. But my business partner and you know, I was just very lucky to find somebody who really had a very similar vision and trusted my vision and was willing to fund that vision and to really come along for it. And I would say he and I, if we were kind of like, the married couple of a business, let's say, we were kind of taking step by step, and both of us were kind of really falling for the concept. And the ceiling just kept growing, the vision kept growing, and the potential and what we were wanting to do just really kept receding, such that we were able to build something that was certainly first of its kind in New Zealand. And to my knowledge, I've never been to a place that runs like this and does what Aro Hā does. So um, I've seen facilities like this, but I've never seen it all brought together, like personal health and built form and permaculture and passive house and net zero and all of these things that we do. I just don't think anyone's ever probably put in the hard work to kind of build something like this. So most guests come here, they kind of scratch the surface. They feel that something's different, like that you can tell in the structures. You've probably just never been in buildings like this before, and yet most of it's really invisible and unseen, and that's kind of okay. Every once in a while, we get acknowledged for the regenerative or the sustainability aspects that we employ, but um, yeah, I guess for me, it's just knowing that that's how we run. That is a lot of the value, and I swear it just comes through the water. I think even though they may not cognitively get it, you get it whether you like it or not. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Now, obviously, whenever you've got a dream or you've got a vision, the next thing is obviously it's got to be turned into reality. Were there any challenges early on that you didn't foresee?
Oh yeah, yeah, heaps of them. I mean, I would say probably one of the biggest challenges that was, because I love traveling like you do, like many of
Yeah,
us do. It's a world where we can just travel and go wherever we want. And my business partner and I, Chris, we were both very open to anywhere in the world. Aro Hā could have ended up anywhere. It was birthed, it was seeded in Zurich. He was living in Zurich, I was working in Spain. We're over in Europe, and we were birthing this idea, and it literally, we were looking at a map, thinking like, where do you put this thing? And so we chose to do it in a country that wasn't our own. We're both Americans, and he doesn't
mm,
live here, but I do, and I would say one of the things that really has been uh, something I think that I reflect on a lot is like, it's a big deal to leave your country, like to move far away from your family and move far away from your friends, and to be in a new place and to set down roots while you're also building a business, and while you're also designing and creating and staffing and just all of these elements of entrepreneurship. I feel like it was like kind of an unexpected layer of challenge. And, I lost a sibling during those early years, and, it just makes everything harder. It just makes everything, all of those relations trickier. And, I have a mother now that's, getting older, and all of those nuances are just, I guess, surprisingly um, present, but there were, gosh, I mean, where do you start? If I were to summarize, like, what if I did this again, like, the number one place I would look is inside myself. I would really just pay attention over and over and over again to what it is that my parts are telling me about what I need to do, who I need to be, what's not enough. Because really all of that pressure and all of that stress was coming from inside. There was nobody flogging me. There was nobody like, I was really just me most of the time rolling around this country trying to pull this whole thing together. And I put the pressure on myself. And I really genuinely notice now today, the difference between making decisions under stress versus making decisions knowing that life will work out, that even decisions that don't work out are decisions that work out.
Mm.
And so, yeah, ultimately that's, I would say for all of us, whether we're, just starting a business or whether we're trying to exit a business or whatever that is, it's what we make things mean it's everything.
Yeah. And, a decade ago, wellness and well-being wasn't what it is now.
No. Yeah. I mean, I remember having conversations with people, especially because here I was 33, so little 33-year-old Damian rolling around having never developed a built, even a home, like I'd never built a home from scratch at that age. And I remember meeting people and you're essentially purchasing expensive pieces of land. Like I was basically meeting with real estate agents and navigating finding where to place Aro Hā. And these people would ask you questions about the project, and especially being American, they'd say something like, "Oh, what are you planning your square meterage rate to be?" And that was like German to me. I didn't know,
Yep.
and so they really looked at me often as just kind of juvenile, I would say, or somebody who didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't. And so it was an interesting experience to go through. You really just had to fake it till you make it. I remember there was one mantra that got me through a lot of it, and it was, um, "What's the worst that can happen?" And I still think it's such a great thing to play out in your mind as frequently as possible. You know, Partners thinking about leaving you. What's the worst that could happen? This or that is happening. What's the worst that can happen? Just let your mind kind of go and just kind of drift through it and go all the way. Like, what's the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst? It's like, for me, anyways, with this project, it was I'll end up back home,
Yep.
and my head could be like, okay, that's not so bad. I end up back home.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because you would have been richer for the experience and the growth
absolutely.
that it gave you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was like I at the because I was going to do an MBA, um, and I really realized that this is better than in any MBA. Is starting your own business and actually just being in the trenches, and whether it succeeds or not, you're learning such an enormous amount. So yeah.
Mm. In those early days, obviously coming into it with a view of sustainability, appreciation for the land that you were on, there would have obviously been some cultural um, considerations you would have had to have put into place, but also knowledge that you would have had to have built very early on.
Yeah, and New Zealand's quite interesting. The North Island is quite different to the south. Like there's an iwi tribe here called Naitahu. That's the tribe of the land where we are. And then there are tribes in the north. And in the north, in terms of cultural kind of, knowledge, they're very much involved. Any construction or business or anything like that has to have the approval of the tribes. And in the south, Naitahu is a little bit more commercial. And so it was a little bit different. I've actually had a hard time connecting with Naitahu. I've invited them to various functions and for conversations and things, and it seemed quite different. I actually connected much more deeply with the Māori culture, with Māori from the north, elders from the north, and in fact, the name Aro Hā, because it's a little bit of a, we're playing with a word which is very well known in New Zealand, Aro Hā, which loosely translates to love. But if you separate that word out to Aro and Ha, you are kind of creating a slightly different meaning. Aro meaning attention or focus or presence, and then Ha, or Ha is the sound of breath, basically, or life force. And so that whole education and development and gift all came from a beautiful woman that we've stayed in contact with named Ruth Makuini. And she also held our opening ceremony with another beautiful gentleman, Hirini. And so there's been a connection over the years. There's been, great learnings. And New Zealand, I think, should be proud, even though it's flawed, of course, like all histories are of colonialism. New Zealand has, a much better relationship compared to what I was modeled in the States. I think America is probably, in many regards, trying to catch up a little bit to what New Zealand has done. And yeah, it's been a beautiful process as an American, coming into another country. It's been a culture that I feel really grateful to have the opportunity to get to know and to get to work in and to get to have family in and to, probably get to die in and be buried in. It's been very cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, obviously, the wellness retreat is renowned as one of the best in the world. Um, Talk to me about the components that you put together in your retreat there at Aro to to kind of, I suppose, satisfy what people need. And maybe it not might not be what they want, but it's probably what they need. What have you learned about that?
Yeah, you definitely touched on it right there. I mean, you know, of our website, I invite anyone to go and have a look at the website, and you read through it, and I think it sounds really appealing, and that's the idea. But we don't ever kind of lay out a full structure of a week. And, one way to think about a retreat is like, what are you not going to get? So we could say things like, no stimulants, no depressants, also known as no coffee, no alcohol, you know,
Yeah.
or know this or know that, or, whatever. And yet, so we pulled together a lot of elements. So Aro Hā is like a subtly potent experience. My mother calls it strong medicine. And basically what she's pointing at is that we are layering in many practices, all of them only at like kind of a moderate level. So we're doing a lot of things. We don't hold you in anything to a really intense degree. Even our yoga and things like that are like all quite, level 1, 2 sort of stuff. And, when you go on hikes, you hike as far as you want, you hike at the pace you want, like everything's this very open at your pace, in your own time, in your own way. And we kind of meet people wherever they are. But we are very consistent with the practice. Yeah. And it's very kind of, it's methodical, it's intentional. There's an intelligent arc to the whole thing. So you're building on what you've done the day before, and it just kind of keeps taking you through this process. And I'm really proud of that. Like, I think the fact that you can be an advanced yogi, and you can come here and have a really potent experience, or you can have zero practice, you can be completely out of shape, you can be recovering from advanced illness. We get people that are here in all sorts of conditions and all sorts of ages, everything from a young person dealing with mental health issues through to 85-year-olds that are doing acro yoga for the first time. And so I think Otter is really special in that it's over many years and over many iterations, it's become something that can meet just about anyone and really kind of invite them into their highest selves in a very consistent way. So there's a lot to it. Every day is different, and yet there are core principles and there are core practices that are being layered in. So we definitely move a good bit. So if we go back to what I was talking about at the beginning, this kind of outside in, right? It's like our environments affect us, what we're eating, the air we're breathing, the people we're around, the sort of conversations we're having, of course, our technology, like all of this kind of environmental stuff that's around us is impacting us. So we're working from the outside in. We're looking at what you're eating. We're bringing you into the kitchen and teaching you about healthy food. We're getting out into nature and surrounding ourselves with, beautiful forests and clear streams and all of these things. And, and then we're working also from the inside out. So, there are, as we kind of layer in the days, there are opportunities to just look inside and do some of the work that you and I have done together, actually.
Mm.
And it's all kind of there. A lot of it's very relaxing, and sometimes you're just laying around and kind of on bolsters and listening to, a beautiful sound bath or something like that. And there are deeply kind of meditative, relaxing spaces. And then there are things that are much more yang, and we do functional movement and Pilates and strength training, and we climb big mountains, and the mountains are as big as we are around here. So even if you're an athlete, like there is a lot of mountain, and you can really go for it, and you can run trails if you want, or you could bring your journal and sit by the first stream that you see, and just write a letter to your aunt or whatever it is. So um, it's a cool program, and every closing circle has tears, and often some of the most insightful reflections. It's like one of the joys of my life is that every week I get to sit in a closing circle and listen to humans coming across, the deepest insights that I know of, so it's cool.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Has there been a guest that, you know, just had transformation that even surprised you?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be fair, I actually think the biggest transformations are often people that I don't expect. I had a guest just a couple of weeks ago. He was a male, you know, nowhere near in shape and very new to everything, and very on the first couple of days, we all, when we're really out of our depth, I mean, I was talking about this a moment ago for myself, like it's uncomfortable to be in something that's where everything is very new. It's really
Mm,
uncomfortable, and it's intimidating. And yet for those, like this gentleman, there's so much more potential for that shift to happen. And if you've never done yoga before and you're doing yogic practices every day for 6 or 7 days, you are going to feel an enormous change in your body, in your psyche, and it'll just kind of creep up on you. And so, yeah, I would say there's like an inverse relationship to this discomfort that's there, the distance that someone is from these sort of practices and this sort of way of living to the change that we see in them. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's awesome.
yeah, perfect. Now, I know you're very passionate around, you know, obviously wellness and well-being and creating these experiences. But for those listening that kind of want that kind of experience, what could they put into their life today that could start to, bring some of that wellness and well-being into their life?
Yeah. This is a practice I use most days. And the fundamentals of it are that we all have moments that are uncomfortable, right? Like every day, probably. There's certainly a fluctuation in comfort and discomfort right through every hour of our lives. Like there just are comfortable thoughts and uncomfortable thoughts, and comfortable body sensations and uncomfortable body sensations. The real question, and this is what wellness gets at, and you could measure your wellness on, like if you've had other experiences or you're going to have future experiences, you can essentially measure the quality of the experience you have based on how practices resolve discomfort,
Mm,
right? And so as you move through your day, let's say today, if you're listening, just reflect on what you notice is most uncomfortable in your life. It might be a thought, it might be a fear, it might be a feeling in your body of lethargy or whatever, something like that. Yeah. So, whatever it is that's most uncomfortable today that you notice, or the first thing that pops into your mind, and then get interested in what you typically do in order to make that feel better. And what do we typically do to make that feel better? It's like most of us, I mean, I certainly have done plenty of this, so much so that I really kind of deeply understand, things that I probably, wish I didn't understand. But most of us intoxicate ourselves. It's like, what makes me feel better? And almost no matter what it is, it's like I can numb out in some way. I can distract myself. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's kind of like the quick fix. Yeah, whatever that is for you, and it's different for everyone. It's like, what do I do when I don't feel good? What do I do when I get in an argument with somebody? Just watch yourself in those moments of discomfort and get really curious as to whether you're doing the thing that would actually ultimately bring the most comfort. Because if I'm feeling really low energy and I've already had a couple coffees and I'm already kind of anxious because of that caffeine, but I'm low energy, I just had lunch and I'm still at my desk and I'm like, oh God, and I don't want to be at my desk. I have options. Like, what am I going to do in that moment? Am I going to have another coffee or two or three and just kind of really ratchet down my adrenals and kind of just like, oh, or, or might I just go take a jog? You're going to feel better with the jog. It's going to wake you up like the coffee. Better. Your mood's going to be better. Everything's going to work out better. Take a meeting, go for a walk outside, get your boss or whoever to go for a walk. I mean, there's just so many ways that we can solve these little moments of discomfort. And so it's a very personal practice. It's something where you'll find your own things that solve your own challenges or your own discomforts. And what I love about it is if you keep doing it and you just keep doing it, you'll make tons of mistakes. At least I did. You might have to make the wrong decision thousands of times for many years,
Mm.
like I did. Um, but eventually, if you keep paying attention, things will start to happen, and you're like, oh, okay, like I don't have to do that. I did this other thing, and it worked out so much better for me, And it won't feel like restriction because if you're restricting, if you feel like restriction um, indefinitely, it never works out. You have to kind of really see that it's better not to drink because you just don't have to deal with hangovers. And there are other ways that you can feel comfortable in social environments, or other ways that you can relax at night, or other ways that you can kind of get what you get from alcohol or whatever it is in different ways. So that practice is really cool because it's modular. You can just take the next discomfort and get curious about it. But then it also has this kind of infinite way of exploring life and exploring all these great practices, and it grows with you.
Yeah. And I suppose what happens is in life, we all can, build a life. We're running along the treadmill, we're working, we put ourselves in environments, but we end up just becoming on autopilot, right? And it's about making that shift and kind of hijacking the brain to go, actually, no, I'm not going to go to the pub. I'm actually going to go to the gym. Or I'm not going to sleep in. I'm actually going to wake up and go for a walk or go and exercise. Doing those kind of things and actually challenging the brain on its autopilot.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're touching on something there that's important, and which is that a lot of the best choices kind of have delayed gratification, and they
Mm.
require some discipline, and they require a bit of grit. And eventually, like, if you get into a habit where you're, taking those walks every day and breaking up your workday, or you're, doing that 20 minutes of exercise morning and evening or whatever it is, there is a level of habit that kicks in there, and so it does become easier and easier and easier and more autopilot-y. But I still think there's like a universal prankster or something, like it's so much easier to just grab a beer than it is to go to work out, even if
Mm.
you love working out, like that's actually just got a little bit more upfront friction and then a much better outcome. So yeah, we need a little grit to do it right.
Yeah. What are your daily non-negotiables?
Oh gosh, I'm an Aquarius, so I am very much. It's not that I avoid habit. I just don't seem to have a lot of habits that are absolute. Like I don't even make my bed every day. I make my bed a
Mm.
lot, but not every day. It's like I have days where I don't brush my teeth. My wife is going to shoot me for saying this in public. I brush my teeth almost every day, but not every day. You know what I mean? I meditated today. I meditate most days, but do I meditate every day? It's like no, I actually don't. And so I guess I'm
And that's
probably,
okay.
yeah, I'm fairly forgiving of myself with things. And I really just look to create, you know, even if you kind of came into our house and you had to look through our pantries and things, you'd see like, like, oh, like 90% really healthy and 10% meh, a little bit of chocolate in there and a little bit of, there'd be some vinegar and salt chips in there and, bits and pieces. So my non-negotiables are probably self-observation is one that is every day. Like I don't think I ever go through a day where I don't just kind of observe my own mood or observe my own parts kind of showing up and, feeling and thinking different things. Um, yeah, that's probably the number one is self-observation. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And one of your guiding mantras is "It's enough, I'm enough." How has that kind of shaped your own journey?
Yeah, yeah. This was a practice that came out of, and I imagine many of your listeners probably have a similar part to mine. I just have some aspects of myself that are very hardworking, and they don't know when to shut off, and they keep going and they keep going and they keep going, and there they are in bed, you know, having conversations with the wife or on the phone trying to solve things or whatever. And I developed a practice where I was trying to figure out, like, how do I, because it was robbing me of my joy. It was even disrupting our relationship and things. And my wife and I work together. So it's very easy for us to mix those worlds, and not really switch off. And so it developed out of a need to create boundary around space where we were not achieving anything. And so basically what we did with it was we said, because even my schedule is different, I don't come home at the same time every day. Every day is different. And we basically said that at some point in the evening, ideally an hour or more before bed, that I would kind of acknowledge out loud or internal if nobody was around, that it's been enough, that it's been more than enough, and that I'm enough and I'm more than enough. And that was kind of it was a little bit of a joke, but it was also kind of like time to stop, and I would turn the phone off and, just switch off everything. And more than anything, just switch my mind off and switch my effort off. And it's not that we wouldn't maybe do a few dishes or, whatever, but we were carving out space for family time and for really do nothing and dim the lights and just kind of start relaxing. And if you've never done this and if you have, busyness inside, you'll be surprised how helpful it is to just acknowledge the day as enough, as more than enough, and yourself as more than enough. It's a really nice thing to hear even from yourself.
Yeah, I love it. It's probably similar to what I do. I just focus on gratitude every day.
Yeah.
Even if I find a moment of stress or a bit of pressure or something like that, I just focus on gratitude, and it always shifts things for me.
It's huge, eh? Even just a few. And even if the first one sounds a bit fake, you're like, I'm happy for my meh, meh, meh. But if you do a few of them, you're like, and I'm grateful for, they start really landing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit like and you've probably done it as well, where if you've been in a setting and people get you to start laughing, right? And to
Yeah.
start off with, you're like, and then over time, the body just takes over, and then you're just laughing at yourself, laughing, and then you're just genuinely laughing, tears coming out of your eyes, and
Yeah.
you started that not from a place of absolute laughter, but just by trying to laugh.
Yes. Totally. Absolutely. Super
So,
fun. Not enough laughter, eh? Yeah.
ah,
And as we get
well,
older, not enough
well,
play.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you've got Tim's book. I saw you posted the other day, and he talks about the two things, like sleep but fun. They're the two
Fun.
things that we need to do better of.
Yeah. It's one of the things that I think our kids invite us into a lot. And I don't know that as parents we always make space for the play and the laughter, but man, if you've got kids, let them remind you how to play. They're good at it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Damien, what does regeneration mean to you? Not just from a planet perspective, but regenerating, the human spirit.
Yeah. So we recently won an award for best regenerative wellness destination of the year, and it was the second time we'd been acknowledged for regeneration. And I think what most people point to with regeneration, it has to do with land and community. That's kind of the traditional look at
Mm.
it. And so Aro Hā regenerates soil and regenerates and works with community. And I think those things are really important. Uh, what I notice, and this is, I guess, a little bit of a continuation, but I have an interrelationship that sometimes feels degenerated. Things happen uh, within me that are heavy, that are hurtful, that kind of break me down. I have thoughts or beliefs or things like that that degenerate my inner state of consciousness. And things like gratitude, actually regenerate, right? They build appreciation and awareness of what I have as being enough. And so there for every what I love about the idea of regenerative is that for every moment in our lives where we have loss, where something is stolen or broken, where our health is damaged, our relationships, our family, where something is lost, where something is damaged or broken, that degeneration has an equal and opposite opportunity for regeneration, or you could say more than equal opportunity for regeneration. And I'm quite sure I've never had this life, but I'm quite sure that if somehow I had had a life where I'd never felt broken, I'd never felt loss, I'd never felt heartbreak, I'd never felt insecure or whatever, if I'd never had degeneration, um, sickness, broken bones, all of these things that really can shake us, I don't know if I'd be anything close to who I am. The regeneration within that degenerated state, the moving through heartbreak and just feeling like all is lost, and then finding a way through that and expanding what my heart can possibly do with love. And just that whole oscillation between those two poles is where I think everything we want actually is. Like, I actually don't think you can learn most of these rich and deep lessons without the hardest of the hard stuff. And you don't wish it on anyone. It's like, oh, we don't need to go looking for it or anything. But when it's there, there is an opportunity on the other side of it. So I've seen it with others, from the darkest of the dark, for people who have been trying to end their own lives, really seeing no hope, no opportunity. I've seen that as an enormous opportunity for change in people's lives, where they just aren't the same people, or certainly the parts of them really just don't hold the same beliefs and the same way of being. So I think there's nothing that's too hard, you know, to not have the potential to regenerate from. And yeah, it's cool. And when we look at the world, at least currently, especially as an American, I see quite a lot of degeneration. I think humanity is probably going to have to go through quite a bit more degeneration before we really swing, through the J curve and learn what we need to learn to come out the other side. And so there's the macro experience and environmental degeneration that also creates an opportunity for regeneration as well. So it allows me, that kind of concept allows me really to hold with open hands, to hold with open heart, all of the things that we know about in this world.
Yeah, beautiful. And how do you see the connection between healing ourselves and healing the world around us?
I mean, I think they're one and the same. I think we should always start inside of us. And I, somebody like you is a living, breathing example of that. And the world, we're talking about gratitude, and it's amazing. Like my wife and I, every once in a while, like if we get into a bit of a funk, we'll go for a walk and we use gratitude, and it's gratitude about the other. Right. And so, we've just been into a bit of an argument, and we're kind of a bit fussy, and our parts are fired up, and we go for the walk, and, we start using gratitude for each other, and the first one is kind of a bit limp. It's like, I'm grateful for, I don't know, your housekeeping or something like that. But by the end of it, you've got like something really, really genuine and heartfelt, where you're like, actually, I love this woman. and we are on the same side. And I'm so grateful that you would even have an opinion and be free to voice an opinion that's opposite to mine. And what's happening there is, in that little micro healing, is, for me anyways, it's like the whole world is healing. It's like all of a sudden nature feels a little bit more healed, and my environment feels a little bit more open, and my heart feels more open, and the whole thing shifts. And I think, yeah, I think it's all really connected. Even if we very kind of logically think about like the ripples of our individual consciousness as we brush into everyone in our environment, even if we just kind of take it as like wings of a butterfly sort of thing, that every energy and every thought, ripples out through the field, that's enough. But the mystics, and I think we can all have experiences of this. The mystics kind of quite literally say it's one and the same, that it's all one
Mm.
field, and it's all in the perceiver. So yeah, it's a fun place to hang out.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a really good tip for couples and people in relationships as well, in regards to, like for me, with my branding, Noise of Life, but also my consulting brand, which is Beyond the Noise, right? And I always find, like, beyond the noise, like the noise makes things or creates a lot of complication for us, a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. But, when someone attends a retreat, or you step away from the noise of kids and family and expectations and responsibilities and roles and those kind of things and titles, outside of that, a lot of the time you actually find the gift of life, you outside the noise.
Yeah, yeah, and almost the change of going from noisy to not. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is also really nice to oscillate. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
beautiful.
What Looking ahead, what's your vision for wellness and well-being, and Aro Hā Retreat over the next 10 years?
Next 10 years. Like certainly in the next few years, or the things that we're really working on, is allowing people more granular and personalized information. We know that the elements of well-being that we're working with are really the top of the top. Like, even, there are new technologies that come along, and I can go into a cryogenic chamber and, reduce inflammation and improve mood and things like that. But a lot of the foundations are unlikely to change anytime soon, because our biology is unlikely to change too much. And yet, what I do what I do see as an obstacle is that it's tricky to motivate people. And you and I have touched on like that resistance that exists in wellness. Like, how do you get us all to make better decisions for ourselves? And one of the ways that I see that happening is in better information. And so when we, for example, test our blood sugar, or wear a CGM, or any number of tests. So we have access now to about 200 different tests that we can do for people, and essentially when we learn something about our body, we often are more easily inspired to do something about it. And so it's about leveraging some of the tools that we have today with technology, with AI, with testing, to create more personalized medicine, more personalized loops of information, so that people feel empowered to make better decisions about their health and wellness. And even just kind of if I know a little bit more about you and what your current state of physical, emotional health is, I can actually more effectively inspire you to make good decisions, right?
Mm.
Um, Not through any sort of wizardry or marketing spiel, but just through highlighting the particular values that solve particular problems for you. And so we live in a time when we can do that more easily and more effectively. So hopefully we can bring more people to wellness and bring more people into healthy practice, and they're able to come and have a powerful experience at Aro Hā, but not slip back into old habits, and take those things home with them and really kind of lock into their local communities and families, and that, the world becomes a healthier place.
Yeah, perfect. And are you, like, from a retreat perspective, are there any future expansion plans or?
Yeah, the only thing we every once in a while something comes across our desk and we look at expanding. To build another Aro Hā is possible. We wouldn't say no to the right partner if that came up. I guess I've spoken to people that just never quite felt right. I think this is a family business, and so it really just has to feel like an extension of the family for us to do it. And more likely, or something that probably is more appealing to me anyways, would be doing something that is a little bit more scalable and in city. So if you imagine like an Aro Hā of the city, which would be kind of a wellness club or uh, a longevity club, built on our philosophy. And there's a concept percolating there a little bit, and we're having conversations with one group, but nothing fully planned at the moment. So we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Now, Damien, when you look back at your life, and your life now, what's one noise that you've had to live with? Like, decide to live with, and what's one noise that you've had to, let go of?
A noise to live with. I mean, the first one that pops into my mind is there was a time where I would sit and meditate a lot, and I would get so annoyed that I had thoughts. And I now am. I have a lot more peace with my thinking mind. It's more that I just observe it, and I think more frequently I kind of giggle at it, or yeah, just have a chuckle at all the things that I think about, and all of the fluctuations and the things that happen in the middle of the night, and there's just such a variety of Damian, and so that noise I think I'm at more peace with. And the second one was a noise I've had to let go of.
One, yeah,
One noise I've
yep,
had to let go of. Um, I've let go. I love music. I actually DJ, and so I really love music. And I grew up at a time. So my younger years were debaucherous as, yeah, I would, did everything that healthy people would never do. And I spent a lot of time in clubs and spent a lot of time dancing, and I loved raves. And I was growing up when raves were, in dusty, dirty, like warehouses and stuff, and or electronic music was just coming up. And so I had a real love for that noise and for those environments and for those communities and for, you know, drugs and for all the things that came in those environments. And I've I've really let go. I don't intoxicate really, even things like psychedelics. It's very rare that I do anything or that I'm shifting my state from, exogenous anything. And so I am very contently and very happily have let go of that part of my life, which I probably thought I never would. At the time, if you said, Damien, you need to stop going out and dancing and partying, I would have, that would have been hard to let go of. But uh, I dance with my daughter now to Wheels on the Bus, and have a great time doing it. So, yeah,
yeah, that's awesome.
yeah.
Damien, I'm grateful for your time. It's been a beautiful connection that we connected some time ago. I'm looking forward to coming and visiting at a Hā retreat very soon,
Yeah.
and experiencing that. I thank you for your insights. I
Mm,
honor your knowledge and your experience and your gift of service to people in the wellness and well-being, but just humanity.
mm,
I love you like a brother, and
yeah.
I just can't wait to continue our connection, and where our paths cross, and where the universe delivers in years to come.
Yeah, cool. Love you too, Steve, and thank you for all the work you're doing and all you're doing in this world. Appreciate you.
Yeah, perfect. Now, Damien, for those that want to reach out to you, where do they connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on social media channels, email damian@aroha.com. You can, anything through Aroha can come to me. So if you ever just need to find us, aroha.com. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
brother.
Steve. Be
It's
well,
been
brother.
awesome. We'll
Okay.
talk soon.
Take care.